Uh, Thanks, Marcus. That was lovely, and we really appreciate it. And I also thank all of you for coming out on this gray day. I've been this here before at these festivals, and every time I come, it makes me feel good, whether it's rain or shine or doesn't matter. People are here paying serious attention to serious questions, and that's great at a time of great distress in the country. It makes me feel good about the future and about you, so thank you. I applaud you for being here. I want to tell you about the book that Dan and I wrote. Usually writers will tell you how agonizing it was and, you know, the difficulties of collaboration and all the rest. But frankly, this was a joy. We love this story. We were privileged to do it. You'll hear more about it. But I also want to tell you why we did it and what we hope to achieve. Actually, the idea began in 2006. 2 years before the election, and I was looking ahead to the next election and what might happen in the way of a book. Teddy White was a friend of mine. I didn't want to do another Teddy White book. He was in his own class, and he was kind of a romantic about politics. I don't feel romantic about politics these days, but I am fascinated by it. And it seemed to me that for a lot of reasons, the election of 2008 had in it elements that were quite historic. The country was in trouble. Everybody knew it. It didn't matter where you went, whether it was Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative, moderate or the rest, urban or rural. Everybody felt the United States was in difficult times, and we seemed to be sinking. Our prestige abroad had diminished to where I had not seen in my lifetime. You had an election that was wide open for the first time in 50 years. No president was seeking to succeed himself. No vice president was seeking to succeed the president. And then you had the backdrop of a series of critical issues. The two wars going on, both terribly unpopular. They're both still with us, as we know. We can talk about that. And they are not over by any means. You had the situation that the people believed that our political system was broken, that no matter where you turn, you didn't know where leadership was going to come. And then you had this extraordinary background of a range of really fascinating potentials in our history. The first real possibility for a woman president. The first real possibility, although unlikely as it might seem at the time, of the first African-American president. You had a throwback to the Vietnam era, John McCain, the hero, the prisoner of war, and then you had a whole cast of other people succeeding to the presidency. So no matter what happened, it struck me that this would be a great story to try to capture. And more important, it was clear that something in the background was ticking away. The economy was in trouble. It had not been declared to be in a recession, although it actually did take place officially in December that year, a year before the election, and wasn't formally named as such until almost before the election. So you had a time bomb, a ticking going on, a collapse of the economy. All of these elements were taking place. And that's the story that I thought was worthy of trying to do it. And I'll let my colleague and friend, I want to say, this could not have been done without a great reporter and great friend, Dan Balz. So I want to turn it over to Dan and let him pick up the story.
Thank you all. Thank you, Haynes. Haynes, as always, is very generous. People say, what was this collaboration like? I say it was horrible. Haynes is so difficult to work with. You get a sense of that. This was a fabulous collaboration. Thank you, Marcus. It's nice to be introduced by the boss. He's been a terrific new addition as our executive editor, so we're very happy at the Post under his leadership. I want to pick up one piece of what Haynes was talking about, which was how this came together. Haynes called me in early 2007 and out of the blue and just said, I'd like to get together with you. I have something I want to talk to you about. And we agreed that we would have breakfast together the following morning to talk about whatever was on Haynes's mind. I went home that night and I said to my wife, Nancy, I said, well, Haynes called today and he wants to get together to talk about something tomorrow. And without missing a beat, she said, well, if it's about a book, just say yes. And in fact, it was about a book. Haynes outlined that morning over breakfast his concept, his idea that this was a year, this was an election, this was a moment in the country's history that deserved a book. We knew that this campaign would be covered minutely, as all recent campaigns have been, but it was his sense that because of where the country was, and because we were at a potential pivot point, that this was a book worth doing. And I listened to him, I heard him out, and I said, Haynes, it's really interesting that you would give me a call about this, because I am 2/3 of the way through a book proposal of my own for the exact same book. We talked about it that morning, and we talked about it for some time, and we decided that the two of us together would be able to produce a better book than either of us individually. The division of labor on this book was pretty obvious. Haynes, throughout his career, both at the Washington Post and as an author of many, many books, has brilliantly captured America at different points in its history. Haynes is the master of the mood of America. He understands voters. He understands a sense of history. He understands where the country is and where it's moving. My responsibility in this project, because I was going to be out every day on the campaign trail, was to be Mr. Inside, to get to know the candidates, to get to know their staffs, and to get as much from them, both for the Washington Post and for the book. And so we teamed up. We knew this would be an interesting story. We had no idea just how interesting it was going to be. One of the challenges of writing a book about an election that is covered as closely as this one was is that everybody believes they know the story of what happened. And in many ways, that's true. Everybody knows how this story ends. It was our challenge and our goal to try to write a book in which people would still find a sense of suspense, a sense of drama, and a fair amount of new information. The new information we were able to get from interviews that we did along the way, that with the permission of our leadership at the Post, we were able to hold until the book came out, with the understanding that the Post would have first shot at any news that was in the book. And at the same time, we were talking to members of the candidate staffs, and we were trying to figure out ways to retell the story. In a sense, when the election was over, to pull it apart and to tell it from different angles, and to describe the campaign in ways that were both familiar and unfamiliar to all of you. We think we accomplished that. We think we have been able to drive the narrative in a consistent way that keeps people turning through pages while bringing together some new information that we think is revealing, particularly of President Obama, and I want to get to that in a minute. At the end of the campaign, we had an interview with the President-elect, which was in December of 2008. It was done at the President-elect's transition office in Chicago. And the first question to him was, you are a storyteller. Before you were elected, before you became a politician, you were a storyteller. He wrote the marvelous book, Dreams from My Father. You could hear his gift for language in all of his speeches. The question was, how would you tell the story of your own election? He paused for a minute, and then he said, this whole election was a novel, and I wasn't the most interesting character in it. Then he talked about John McCain, Hillary Clinton, Reverend Wright, and of course, Sarah Palin. One of the things we feel is that this is a story that is both large and small. The large story is how America elected what we describe as the most unlikely person ever to be elected President of the United States, Barack Hussein Obama. But within the context of that large story and the forces that were at work that brought the country to that point last November are a series of smaller stories, stories that are equally fascinating. There is the story of Hillary Clinton's early rise as a candidate and her ultimate fall in Iowa. There is the story of Barack Obama's early struggle as a candidate. I mean, I think it's easy in retrospect to think of President Obama as having been on a glide path to the presidency from the moment he gave that speech in Boston at the 2004 convention, and that forever after, once the sort of light went on, it never went off. The reality is, in the first months of his campaign, that went on for a number of months, he was struggling. He was having great difficulty as a candidate. We recount in the book an episode in the late spring of 2007 when Robert Gibbs, now the White House press secretary, took a trip with him to Iowa. Obama was at a low point at that time. He was unhappy with his campaign. He was unhappy with his performance. He was unhappy with most of his staff. He missed his family. He was physically exhausted. Robert Gibbs said to him that day, "Senator, find one thing positive that you think about from this campaign and focus on that and forget all the rest and everything will be fine."